What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Musi Game here, and today I'm back with another chapter of a series that I've done in the past but has paused for a while. But then again, I think it's time for me to actually revisit, which is a series called Art of War. Now, the reason why I actually stopped making those Art of War series was simple, is because for one, not a lot of you were actually interested in the chapter 0 and chapter 1 of this series. But then again, two, I took a look at it and I was like, well, maybe it's because the thumbnail and maybe the titling and all that was not really that appealing. And three, as I was doing KVK1 fighting on my restart account, I thought there will be a lot of things that a lot of people still don't know, especially the younger players who are in their KVK1 or pre-KVK stage. So I thought it will be kind of cool idea for me to actually go back and revisit this series called Art of War, where I'll go over every mechanics of the game, including the damage basics as well as troop types and how you can field fight, how you can fight on the garrison side or the rally side. That will basically go over basic strategies that you can actually learn about the game. So that's why I'm resuming this series. And also at the same time, I kind of did the revamp of the whole design. So if you guys haven't checked out my previous two chapters, chapter 0 and chapter 1 of Art of War, chapter 0, I believe, is called Introduction, and then chapter 1 is actually about troop types. You guys can go ahead and check those out from the end of the video, where I'll actually showcase the playlist for this as well. But today, we'll be talking about the damage basics. Now, in today's video, we're going to go ahead and go over each types of damages that are available in Rise of Kingdoms. And also, at each stage, we'll go ahead and also talk about like how the buffs work, as well as what kind of buffs are buffing each damage. So, for example, skill damage will be buffed by still, all damage, skill damage buff, and skill damage boost. So we'll be talking about each and every one of damage, and then for those of you, especially those of you who are new to the game, to understand how the buffs and boosts work at the end of the day. And also at the same time, eventually we'll also arrive at a conclusion of three general damage principles that you can apply regardless of the timing. For example, even if the meta changes, the fact that counterattack damage, increasing the counterattack damage, will actually help when you are getting swarmed will not change. So those are kind of like the examples of the principles that I'll be going over at the end of each chapter. So that's basically what we're going through. Now, at the first section, we're going to go ahead and first talk about the types of damages that there are. And there are three different chapters of the damage, and that is one, normal damage, which includes everything that is like impacted by the normal damage buff and boost. There's also skill damage, which is actually very interesting, where you actually, whenever you see the word additional damage or direct damage, that's basically what the skill damage is. And then eventually we'll also talk about true damage, although it's kind of weird that we're talking about it right now in 2025. But true damage is an important part of Rise of Kingdoms, and I think it is a good idea for me to actually just talk about true damage and how it works, because not everyone actually understands how true damage works. So that's the three major types of damages that we'll be taking a look at. And let's start with normal damage, because this is the most basic form of damage that you'll be taking a look at. And first things first, we'll take a look at basic attack. So basic attack is something that you inflict when you're attacking someone facing the enemy. Now, we'll go over other types of normal damage too, and then that would include counterattack damage. But when you're launching a basic attack, you are basically launching an attack against someone that you're facing at the end of the day. So that's not counterattack, that's not something else, that is basic attack. And in that basic attack, I think this is the part that a lot of people don't know, is that each basic attack actually has the same damage as a damage factor of 200. And this is fixed. And what a lot of people don't know is that, like all basic attack doesn't really have a damage factor. No, it does. It does have 200 damage factor. And that has never changed before or after. So yeah. So you can just take that as granted. Every time you do a basic attack, you're doing 200 damage factor of damage. So over 10 seconds, if you're inflicting damage with your basic attack against whatever the troop that you're attacking, you're ultimately doing 2,000 damage factor of damage to the enemy. So something for you to kind of consider and know about this basic attack, if you didn't know. And this is buffed by normal damage, normal damage boost, as well as all damage. But all damage I taken out of all of the damage buffed by section because all damage by definition is going to actually apply for all damage, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to actually include there. But you'll have two different coefficients that you'll be able to multiply your damage factor by on top of all damage. So if you're doing 200 damage factor of basic attack, you'll be multiplying that by whatever percentage of normal damage buff that you have, as well as normal damage boost that you have, on top of all damage boost that you have. So that's basically how you can take a look at basic attack. Now, to kind of show you the diagram of how the basic attack works, so let's say I'm swarming this barbarian, right? And this barbarian is facing me, right? So that basic attack from barbarian is taken by my Tutmos, whereas my Tutmos, Minamoto, and I think this is Sun Tzu, is all inflicting basic attack to this one target of barbarian. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because this is going to be important comparison when you look at counterattack damage in 2 seconds. Now, speaking of counterattack damage is the damage that you inflict when you're attacked by the enemy with the same damage factor of basic attack. So whenever you're getting attacked, you're also inflicting to the enemy the same amount of damage that you would do otherwise with basic attack, on top of the buffs that will be applied specifically to counterattack damage. Now, if you look at it here, damage factor of 200. Again, counterattack damage and basic attack damage all both have damage factor of 200 fixed for the game. Again, not a lot of people know about this, but again, it's the exact same amount of damage that you're doing, unless you have more counterattack damage buff coefficient added to this. And this damage is buffed by normal attack damage, normal attack boost, and counterattack damage boost. So it does have one extra layer of multiplier that you can actually apply when you're calculating the damage for counterattack. So if you actually look at it from the same diagram, you can see that counterattack damage that this marsh does is actually it's not only limited to the Tutmos that is attacking, but then again also at the same time, because my Minamoto and Sun Tzu is also attacking me, I'm inflicting counterattack damage to each and every one of them. 200 damage factor, 200 damage factor, 200 damage factor. So in theory, in 10 seconds, I'm doing 6,000 damage factor of damage, or this barbarian is doing 6,000 damage factor of the damage to whatever enemies that are attacking you. And then the only one from our side that is inflicting counterattack damage is actually Tutmos, because Tutmos is the only one that is getting attacked by the barbarian. So yeah, that's how counterattack damage works, and that's why I separated those two out, just so you are aware of how the counterattack damage and normal damage works with one another. I know that some of you who are actually playing this game for years may not find this kind of interesting, but I think this is an actually good distinction that you kind of need to know, especially for younger people. Now, a different type of normal damage also exists that is called the Smite damage. And this is a type of red damage that scales off of normal damage and normal damage boost, while also separately getting boosted by Smite damage and Smite damage boost. Now, this is basically the concept that came out as skill damage was the only type of damage that there was in the game. And then they're like, oh, well, what if there is a skill damage or red damage, whatever they would like to call it, that actually gets buffed by normal damage and normal damage boost? And that's when the Smite damage came in. And then later, they actually added the pincer and the pincer damage, pincer boost. Pincer damage is, what's this called? Special inscription, so that they added like the Smite damage boost as well as Smite damage buff, unless it was from the commander's kind of skill set. So it's very interesting how Smite damage was added to the game, but it's the type of damage, red damage, that scales off of normal damage and normal damage boost, while also getting boosted by the Smite damage and Smite damage boost. So it is buffed by normal damage boost, Smite damage buff, Smite damage boost that you can actually get from armaments as well as the commander's skill set. And it is currently the meta for infantry. Now, there's also another type of normal damage that is called a combo damage. Now, this is a type of red damage, again, the same thing, that can also trigger whatever things that are triggered by auto attacks or normal basic attack. That scales off of normal damage boost, combo damage boost. Now, the only difference between combo damage and smite damage is that it can also trigger, whenever you do combo damage to the enemy, you can also trigger whatever you would be able to trigger with your basic attack. So, technically speaking, among all normal damage bases, combo damage actually has the most benefits because you can not only get buffed by a normal damage and normal damage boost as well as combo damage and combo damage boost, it can also trigger the auto attack triggering effects that you cannot do with smite damage, right? So it not only has the most number of multiplier that you can actually multiply the damage by, but also it has a chance to trigger whatever the basic attack triggers. So technically speaking, among all different types of normal damage that there is in the game, combo damage technically is the best type of damage that you can do in among normal damage candidates. But currently, I think the smite damage is at a little bit of advantage just because of the fact that the pincer and whatever the inscription does for pincer is actually quite overpowered in terms of the amount of bonus that you get from that. And again, buffed by normal damage boost, combo and combo damage boost, and also at the same time, it is currently the meta for cavalry. Now, moving on to skill damage, there's only two types of skill damage that you can think of, and that is, and the first type of skill damage is called the direct damage. Any direct damage is basically any damage that is mentioned as direct damage and is technically a subset of skill damage. But basically, it's a bread and butter of skill damage at the end of the day. There are some damage that is dealt as additional damage, but most of the damage that you can do in Rise of Kingdom is going to be basically called direct damage, and those are the skill damage. And those are simply just buffed by skill damage and skill damage boost on top of all damage. Now, if you move on to specific details of it, there are certain commanders that do specific types of skill damage called additional damage. And this is a subset of skill damage that are only used by a few commanders, such as Minamoto and Shapur. Maybe I'm missing some commanders, but then again, those are the commanders that mainly are known for dealing additional damage that could become additional source of skill damage for archers. Right now, I think the only commander that we have that was released within the last 3 years that has this additional damage factor is actually Shapur the First. So this does have a huge potential for it being like something that archers will do most of the time. And it's currently buffed by, as far as what I am aware of, skill damage and skill damage boost. Now there is an additional damage buff that is only currently available for latent power, as far as what I can believe, as far as what I know from the talent tree. But I would say additional damage buff and additional damage boost could come in the future. Now there's also the last type of damage that is called the true damage. And this is a new type of damage that was introduced with the release of a new commander, Archer Commander, when it was first released, called Choyoung. And this is exclusively dealt by Choyoung that ignores the enemy's defense, but also ignores Choyoung's attack. So, just for reference, every single damage that is in Rise of Kingdoms that gets multiplied by two things. That is, all damage boost as well as whatever the commander's attack is. Now, Choyoung's true damage does not actually get amplified by the Choyoung's attack, but also ignores the enemy's defense. Very interesting concept and very interesting type of damage, and it is buffed by no existing buff. I would say maybe all damage would actually buff this, but I'm not even sure about that. But there's only one type of way, there's only one commander that does this damage, and that is called Choyoung. And then this Choyoung's damage is actually scaling off of healing factor for Choyoung. So however much that he heals himself, it actually does damage in proportion of that. So there's no such thing as true damage buff or boost in the game yet. There's only formation, I think that's called circle formation, that actually buffs the healing amount, not necessarily the true damage buff or true damage boost in the game. But it could come in the future. But as far as what we were informed before, currently the Rise of Kingdoms developers has officially, kind of semi-officially or officially abandoned this type of damage because it causes too much headache in terms of ignoring the defense and ignoring the attack. Then like as a health only kind of type of the stats that matters when you're dealing with true damage. There's just too much hassle that they have to deal with. So as far as what I know, they have officially abandoned this type of damage. So currently, only Choyoung does this damage because that was the direction that they were originally thinking about going with archers. Instead of going full out, like skill damage is going to do the maximum damage with Qin Shi Huang. Before, the direction was actually, okay, well, we're going to release Choyoung and not Shapur. What was her name again? What was her name? What was the girl's name? Or woman, in general. Let me just go ahead and look it up on the game, because I have her out. Yeah, Shazar, yeah. So they released Shazar and Choyoung. Shazar only does healing, and then Choyoung does healing and true damage scaling off of heals. So they released those two commanders. They're like, okay, the true damage is going to be the new thing for archers. But then again, after giving it, I guess, a little bit of thought, they looked at defense. Well, defensive attack is so important in the game. I don't know if we should actually go the direction of true damage, right? So they has abandoned this so far, but it could come back, maybe. I don't know. Who knows what the developers are going to do? But as far as what we've been informed before, they have officially, semi-officially abandoned this type of damage called true damage. Now, let's get to the everlasting principles for the damage chapter of this Art of War series. And that is, boosts are generally better than normal damage buffs. Not normal damage, but normal buffs. Like, so skill damage buffs, normal damage buff, whatever it is, smite damage buff, combo damage buffs. But boosts are usually more valuable than those buffs. And then the all damage buff comes after those buffs. And in most cases, above statement is true because, for one thing, let's say you have 70% of goodness that could all be distributed to all damage or be spread out among the boosts and the normal damage, right? If you actually spread the 10% to boost, 20% to normal damage buff, and then 40% to all damage, you actually multiply all those three different things as separate multiplier, you get 84.8% of all damage buff, like total damage buff that you'll get for whatever damage that you're dealing, which is better than 70% all damage in general cases. And so it is valuable because if you spread out the multiplier, chances are that you're going to have higher damage almost all the time. But on top of that, boosts are harder for you to get because in most cases, boosts are only acquirable through armor's special inscriptions, whereas damage buffs are more commonly found in commander's skills. For example, skill damage, right? If you look at, I don't know, YSG's kit, it has 50% skill damage buff. And if you actually do give him like the full artifact, Iconic 3 artifact, then you're going to give him 62% skill damage buff. Whereas skill damage boost, you can only find from getting Hunter and all those different things that you'll be able to get from the wedge formation, right? So chances are, most of the time, boosts are more valuable stats to get than regular buffs. And then all damage, on the other hand, is a lot more common for you to get because, for one, whenever you enter Season of Conquest KVK, you're given 40% all damage just right off the bat. So any march that is running in KVK Season of Conquest are going to run 40% or 45% of all damage just embedded into their kit because, for one, you do 5% more damage if you're VIP 17 or better, right? So you get 5% from that, and then all damage you get 40% from that, right? So you already start off the whole kit with 45% damage buff, and then there's things like Ring of Doom that actually buffs that even further by like another 60% if you have a crit one. So in most cases, boosts are better, buffs are second, and then all damage buff comes last, is what I found, and what most people find generally true for damage. Now, principle number 2, counterattack damage scales better than any other damage. And this is true because of one reason, because you don't have a cap on how much counterattack damage they can do to the enemies. For example, if you're swarmed by 3 or more marches, you do 8,000 damage factor in 10 seconds of damage cycle because you're attacking the enemy that you're targeting right now, which is going to be normal damage factor of 200. And then 3 people that are attacking you, you're doing counterattack damage to them on top of that, which is going to do another 600 damage factor per second. So over 10 seconds, you're technically doing 8,000 damage factor within the 10-second damage cycle. This is why a lot of people are very afraid to swarm an Attila rally, because Attila has so much buff with normal damage buff of 30% as well as counterattack damage buff of 30% whenever he does use his active skill, and that's going to scale so much if you swarm him. So counterattack damage can scale better than any damage, because if let's say you're Qin Shi Huang's AoE damage only can hit 5 targets, right? Whereas if you're swarmed by 10 different people, your counterattack damage does scale much better than any other damage. If you're swarmed by 5 marches, you can theoretically do more normal damage than Qin's entire kit. Is the second blueprint right here. Granted, and this is the important part, granted that you can actually survive and sustain long enough. Because if you're getting swarmed by 5 different marches and you get through one skill cycle of 10 seconds, you're going to be very low where you don't do enough damage to the enemy, for one. And two, like, yeah, you might get reinforced and all that. But chances are you're not in a place where you can actually hit all of them with your AoE or whatever that you're doing. So there are some conditions, but theoretically, counterattack damage scales better than any other damage, is the principle number 2 that I have for you. Now, principle number 3. Smite or combo damages are generally higher because you multiply those 2 damages with so many multipliers. So, for example, if you're calculating the equation for the combo damage, you have the base damage. Let's say it's 200 damage factor. You also multiply that by all damage, and then normal damage buff, normal damage boost if you have any, and then combo damage buff from whatever kit that you have with the commander, and then combo damage boost if you have those from your armaments. It is absolutely crazy how many multipliers that you can do. So, for example, if you're doing with Bai Chu with Liu Che, you have active skill damage at a 17%, a 17 VIP will give you 45% all damage, like I talked about before. With Pincer Formation, you have 2400 damage factor of the Bai Chu's kit with 145% damage factor, that is all damage, and then 20% normal damage boost buff from his kit with Bai Chu Liu Che's kit overall has 20% normal damage buff, which is fine. And then you don't have any normal damage boost because you're using Pincer. But then again, you have 2 different multiplier that will give you 15% smite damage boost, buff, and then 20% smite damage boost from the armament. So that makes the total damage outcome buffed up to 5,762, which is actually 40% more, 140% more than the original damage factor. But if you add all those buffs at the end, it's only 100% damage, right? If you add 45 plus 20 plus 15 plus 20, that just adds up to 100%, right? So you get so much multiplier at different places that when you're using combo or smite damage, you do so much more damage than, let's say, a skill damage, right? Even if you have 100% of skill damage, that Just calculate that into this, right? If you have 100% skill damage, that's the only time that you'll be able to beat this, right? And that is very hard for you to achieve if you're using a skill damage march, right? So that's why, generally speaking, I think it is fair for you to say that smite or combo damages are generally higher because you have so many places that you can multiply with. You just have more multipliers in general because it gets buffed by normal damage boost, and then combo damage and combo damage boost, whereas skill damage only has two different factors, which is skill damage buff and then skill damage boost, right? So that's basically the general concept. Oh, I was blocking this all the way. There you go. Yeah, again, 140% extra damage on top of the normal damage. So this is 240% of total damage that you're doing. Whereas if you just add up all the buff, you only get 100% extra at the end. So yeah, so that's basically all the principles, everything that you need to know about Rise of Kingdoms damage. I hope this was actually helpful especially for younger players who actually started out the game. And if you guys did find today's video helpful, please go ahead and drop me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If this video does well, I'm going to actually continue on to this Art of War series on to the next episode and chapter so that you guys can learn more about open field fighting as well as rallying, garrisoning, just basics and strategies that you can actually take on each and every one of them. So I hope this was really helpful for you. If you guys did, please let me know. Please let me know, because otherwise I'm not going to continue this series, because if no one's watching this series, then why am I doing it, right? So yes, so please let me know. And if you guys haven't already done so, please go ahead and drop me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'll see you all in the next video. All right, peace.